You wake up in a haze, slowly. Are you still dreaming? No, you're awake. Where are you? You shift slightly. Ah, yes, you're in bed. That's good. But you feel odd. What's going on? Suddenly it creeps up on you. Ugh. That queasiness in your stomach. That stale taste in your mouth. Now you remember. You were hammered last night. Time to assess the rest. Head, throbbing. Throat, dry. Arms, weak. Legs, twitchy. Yep, it's a hangover. Welcome to Stone Cold Moderation, a thinking man's journey toward a healthier relationship with alcohol. I'm your host, Chase Lee. Let's continue with our story. Since you're still a bit drunk, you know it's only going to get worse. You try to go back to sleep. You flip over to the other side of the pillow, but the pounding between your eyes refuses to soften. Fine. You fumble around for your phone, and then you sit up in bed. After thoughtlessly swiping through Instagram for a moment, you decide to make a move. Operation Hydration. You gingerly hoist yourself out of bed and stagger over to the kitchen. For now, you'll just try to drink a glass of water. You down it cautiously. Big mistake. It doesn't quite land right in your tummy. You weren't ready for that. You get back into bed and recline against the headboard. Ugh, this ain't it. You flop on your laptop and declare that you won't move a muscle until you feel better. You'll will your way into defeating this hangover. But 5 minutes later, your forehead is absolutely ringing and you feel your stomach churn disconcertingly. Your hands are shaky. You sit up. Should you try eating something? Nah, you probably won't be able to keep it down. You swing your legs over the side of the bed. You lean over, elbows on knees and head in hands now. This is not good. This is limbo. Your tummy swirls again, and suddenly you taste bile. Your face starts to burn, and you feel beads of sweat forming on your skin. Your heart is racing. A wave of nausea surges over you, and now it's about time. You're gonna pop. You stumble out of bed and shove open the bathroom door. You collapse in front of the toilet and absolutely unload. Lovely. You're shocked at the amount of liquid that you've just produced. All those beers and Cuba Libres from last night that you couldn't quite digest, floating around inside you all night. Oof. That was not pleasant at all. Quite painful, in fact. You clean up a bit, get yourself together, and then take a look in the mirror and see a literal dumpster fire staring back at you. What a mess. Your eyes have exploded, and around them, specks of red, like tiny fresh bug bites all over your skin. You've thrown up so hard that you've burst capillaries. That will bruise. What a mess. So what just happened? Why did drinking that much cause such a violent physical reaction hours later? What just went down in your body, and more importantly, in your head?
Perfect.
Yeah. Raise your hand if you have ever been there. So hungover from the night before, still a little bit drunk, that you throw up. Yeah, we've all been there, right? I have been there many, 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 many times, and it's never fun, and it's always painful and always a little bit scary too. You're like, Jesus, like what did I do to my body to bring on this reaction? Um, but even the countless times that I did that, um, didn't get me to stop drinking until many years later. But here we are. Anyways, no looking back. Um, a little bit of looking back, but you know what I mean. What I wanted to talk about in this episode is I wanted to focus on the effects of alcohol consumption. Excuse me. But I wanted to talk about the points that and the effects that are not as well known, because I think we've all had some sort of education, whether thorough or not, on the effects of alcohol. We all know that, you don't do it when you drive because it's, because you can't drive impaired. We know that it affects your memory. We know that it, upsets your stomach, things like that. We know that it can be addictive, which again, that's controversial, but those are things that, in middle school sex ed class, when you talk about drugs and alcohol, these are some of the things you talk about. But there is a lot of information out there that is relatively unknown, and stuff that in this process of making this podcast and the research that I've done, that I've been exposed to, which I found really, really shocking. So I wanted to maybe shocking isn't, well, yeah, shocking, a little bit shocking, surprising. But again, things that are not well known about the effects of alcohol. First things first, relating back to the story I just told, a hangover. We've all experienced it, right? But what exactly is going on in your body and in your head that is responsible for those horrible feelings, that horrible physical reaction the day after? Okay. A couple things. First of all, well, there's many reasons. First of all, dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. Okay. So alcohol is a diuretic, so it makes you go to the bathroom more. And it triggers your body's reaction to urinate and release liquid, which is why when you drink so much, and why you drink at all, you have to pee a lot, right? And so it flushes out a lot of liquid out of your system, which is why if you're out on a night out and you're not constantly drinking water and like replenishing those fluids and ingesting electrolytes the entire night, you wake up the next day very, very dehydrated. So that's why that happens. Low blood sugar. When you drink alcohol, it inhibits the production of glucose in your body, okay, which can lead to the feelings of fatigue and tiredness the day after, right? Wake up with a hangover, you're tired all day. This is why. Low blood sugar. The next thing is the withdrawal. Withdrawal. I can't pronounce that fucking word. Excuse me. The depression of the nervous system caused by alcohol can then cause it to become hyperactive afterwards. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a little bit. But basically, when you drink alcohol, it's a depressant, which causes your body to release certain of its natural stimulants after, which makes you like shaky, and which causes like the rapid heartbeat, which is strange because I always thought that was because of like the dehydration, which it might be. I'm not really sure. Again, I'm not a scientist. But yeah, it basically puts your nervous system into whack, which makes you trembly, which is a horrible feeling. That's one of my least favorite things about being hungover. Okay, moving on to another one of the physical effects of alcohol consumption, and the one for me that was one of the most surprising that I didn't really know much about before starting this podcast and starting my investigations was the effect of alcohol on sleep. So I kind of figured everybody kind of knows that if you drink alcohol at night, at some point you'll wake up and you'll have to pee, and that will disrupt your sleep, which it does. Um, but also, alcohol has a detrimental effect on sleep in that it decreases your rapid eye movement, REM, which in turn will impede you from entering one of the deep stages of sleep, which is so important to us to actually get a good night's rest and for our bodies and our brains to regenerate. Okay. Um, yeah, I had no idea about that before, which is really troubling. The amount of times that I had it one or two before going to bed because people think that, it actually helps your sleep because it relaxes you. And true, it can, the soothing effect of your first one or two drinks can help you fall asleep faster, but it actually can it can keep you from getting a good night's sleep because again, it affects the rapid eye movement. Um, yeah, that for me was really surprising. So I'm not a huge fan of drinking like at night at all anymore, really, and especially not if I'm just alone in my house because I know even if I get 7 or 8 hours of sleep, if I've drank before that, I will not have rested as well because of the alcohol. Okay, moving along. Physical effects of alcohol consumption. Next is the effect on weight. Alcohol is an appetite stimulant, right? So if you drink alcohol, you get hungry. We've all had the munchies before, the drunchies as well when you're drunk and you need to eat. Okay, that's the thing. And of course, goes without saying, all of the empty calories that you are ingesting when you are drinking alcoholic beverages. A lot of empty calories there. Um, should be stated that alcohol, if you are at a level of, I guess, alcoholism in which you're drinking so much that you forget to eat, that's a different story. And that's a thing, right? People who are so have fallen so far down the spiral of alcoholism that they are, like skeleton skinny because all they're doing is drinking all day and they're forgetting to eat. That's that's a thing. Again, that's a thing, but in effect, usually for normal people and I guess typical drinkers, it actually causes you to put on weight because again, it's a stimulant for your appetite. Okay, moving right on along. The next thing is the single most surprising piece of information that I've learned since learning about the physical effects of alcohol consumption is that alcohol is a Class A carcinogen, which I did not know. Class A carcinogen is toxins that are known to cause cancer. We talk a lot about how smoking causes cancer. We talk a lot about how a lot of things that you can expose yourself to cause cancer, but we really never talk about alcohol and cancer. But there it is. It's a Class A carcinogen. For me, it was shocking to find this out. Read an article from a couple of years back. It's from the BBC. From the 28th of March, 2019. No, I guess that was just last year. Again, BBC News. This article is called How Many Cigarettes and a Bottle of Wine? And what it says is, and I'm going to read right from the headline so that I don't screw it up, is that drinking one 750 milliliter bottle of wine a week increases the risk of developing cancer over a lifetime by the equivalent of 10 cigarettes a week for women and 5 for men, a study says. And it was a study done by the University of Southampton and Bangor University in the United Kingdom. Wow. So in women, drinking one bottle of wine is as risky as smoking 10 cigarettes in a week, because apparently women are more susceptible. And for men, 5 cigarettes in a week. One bottle of wine. Ooh. That to me I was floored when I read this, because this is never the conversation that surrounds alcohol, is how it relates to cancer. It's always how it relates to your memory, how it relates to, I don't know, how it relates to causing you to be impaired when you're driving drunk. But cancer, no. Like cancer, no. I mean, we talk about cigarettes, we talk about smoking, and this article goes on to conclude. Well, it cites other studies that concluded that smoking was more harmful than drinking, essentially, for a number of reasons. And again, I will leave the information about this article in the show notes so you can check it out for yourself. But I think more importantly is that, yeah, like we don't talk about this. If somebody quits smoking, we applaud them. We're like, yay, good for you. You're doing something good for yourself to avoid putting yourself at risk for cancer. But everybody drinks, right? And when somebody stops drinking, we ask them, what's wrong with you? We don't applaud them for fighting back against cancer. Damn. So yeah, that really speaks to the toxicity of alcohol. Again, it's a poison, and it puts you more at risk for cancer. Highly recommend that you check out that article. Yeah, BBC, how many cigarettes in a bottle of wine, from the 20th of March, 2019. Very fascinating stuff. Okay, moving right along. Finishing up talking about the physical effects of drinking. For men, effect on testosterone, and I guess for women as well, right? I don't know. Somebody correct me. But yeah, drinking lowers testosterone levels, which I suppose affects men more because we have more testosterone. We're more reliant on it. Is that correct? I'm not a scientist. I don't know these things. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, affects testosterone levels in men, which has a lot of terrible effects for men. Weight gain, low sex drive, mood changes, all the bad things. And I kind of knew this before, but I think why I wanted to talk about it is because it's the opposite of what is depicted in pop culture of an alcoholic man, or a drinking man, so to speak. One of my favorites, Don Draper, John Wayne, Bradley Cooper in that movie, A Star Is Born, right? Like these kind of guys these kind of characters who are heavy drinkers and are depicted as, these alpha male, strong, dominant, ultra manly, ultra macho forces. When in fact, alcohol actually has the opposite effect. It will make you bald, just like me. It'll make you fat. It'll make you terrible in bed, right? And it'll make you sad because it affects your mood. And okay, that last point, like a lot of times, like the heavy drinking man is seen as sort of like a tragic hero, especially like Don Draper. That's a classic example because he's miserable, right? But what guy wouldn't want to be Don Draper? Because he is the man, and he drinks all fucking day. But yeah, in effect, what usually happens with alcoholic men is the opposite. It's in fact emasculating because it makes you less manly, to put it into simple terms. It's not what you see on TV. Yeah, interesting stuff to think about. Last thing, finishing up here, is the myth of antioxidants, because there's a lot of I guess, some misconceptions out there about this. Yeah, like a glass of red wine has some antioxidants, um, but it's probably not a reason to drink alcohol because you can get antioxidants from a lot of other things, like fruit and normal food. Um, so the idea that drinking, alcohol in moderation can be good for you because of like I guess the nutrients it provides is kind of ridiculous because you can get those things other places without putting alcohol and poison into your body. Food for thought. Again, myth of antioxidants. And it's funny how that becomes an excuse for people to drink, that glass of red wine or those 2 glasses or that beer. It's like, oh, it's got antioxidants. It's like, well, you could go eat some strawberries. I think that probably has a higher amount of antioxidants and you won't be poisoning yourself. Anyways, okay. Yeah, finishing up the physical effects of alcohol consumption. Yeah, and please give me some feedback on this. If you're somebody who, because obviously I'm not a scientist, but if you're somebody who knows a lot about this, please hit me up. If I said something incorrect, if you disagree, if you have other information, feel free to hit me up. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about the psychological effects of alcohol consumption. And I know this is a little bit unpleasant, and the people who are still listening and didn't turn off this podcast 5 minutes ago, I thank you. Bear with me, I hope you're finding this valuable and hopefully learning some stuff that maybe you didn't know before, because I thought I knew a lot about alcohol a year ago, and turns out I really didn't until I really started to investigate and learn things. So let's talk about it. Psychological effects. So something I'm a little bit confused about. In a previous episode, one of the first episodes, actually, I talked about how alcohol releases dopamine in the brain and other neurotransmitters, which leads to a feeling of pleasure. Okay. And so the intense feelings of pleasure that drugs like alcohol can cause will afterwards cause your brain to swing in the other direction and kind of overcompensate, right? Which leads you to end up feeling depressed afterwards, because you just went from really extreme feelings of happiness to extreme feelings of sadness and depression because your mind it overbalances and overcompensates. So that I get because I've experienced that and it kind of makes sense to me. But also what alcohol does is it's a depressant, right? So it depresses your body's natural stimulants, if I'm understanding that correctly. Which then also causes your mind, your brain, after that to release its own natural stimulants. Okay, which is why the anxiety and kind of the shakiness, right? The shakiness and the kind of the anxious, like kind of trembling feelings that you get after you drink. It comes from the fact that since you've ingested all of these suppressants, your body is then trying to balance the scale and releasing its own stimulants. So are those, I mean, I guess that makes sense, but are those two, unless I'm understanding something wrong, there's something that feels a little bit contradictory to me in that. So maybe I'm just not understanding exactly correctly, because on one end or maybe those two effects are happening at the same time, where it's causing this pleasure because it's releasing all of these neurotransmitters, but it's also depressing stimulants, which, for me, that seemed contradictory, but I guess they could be happening simultaneously. Again, if you understand this better than I do, please, please hit me up and help me understand. But the point is, after all that, is drinking alcohol will trigger depression and anxiety on a cerebral level, because it throws your whole system into whack, essentially. And that most people who have drank alcohol and binge drink can affirm to that. It is directly connected to triggering depression and anxiety, which is why I don't like to do it anymore. Okay, also, book I just read by a fellow named William Porter. His book is called Alcohol Explained, and it's basically all about what I am talking about right now, the effects of alcohol consumption. And he talks about something called subconscious triggering, which I thought was pretty interesting. And I don't know if I completely agree with it, and I don't know if it completely makes sense to me, but here it goes. I do recommend the book, though, however. It's very interesting. And I'm going to leave, obviously, some information about that in the show notes. So, basically what he says, subconscious triggering, if you take a drink, you're going to feel immediate relaxation, right? Because your body is being depressed of its natural stimulants, right? Because alcohol is a depressant, followed by a feeling of anxiety, right? Because your body then releases its own stimulants to make up for to meet that reaction to the alcohol, which is why you later on feel anxiety. The more that somebody drinks, the more they will exist and end up in this state of perpetual anxiety, right? So if you can imagine somebody who's an alcoholic who drinks every day, when they are not drunk, they're constantly just incredibly anxious because their body has gotten to a point where it's just firing off all these stimulants. Okay. And basically what William Porter is saying is that over time, your subconscious will kind of, I guess, absorb this and understand it, so to speak, and believe that the only remedy for this anxiety, this perpetual anxiety that the subject is feeling, is to take a drink of alcohol, because it relieves that a little bit, even though it was actually alcohol that caused the anxiety in the first place, right? So yeah, he's basically saying that alcohol gets into your subconscious and can cause you to become dependent on it. And this is his definition and his view on addiction and how it relates to alcohol as well. So, which makes sense because he goes on later in the book to talk about why he is against the disease model of alcohol, which I'm actually going to devote an entire episode to at some point. But the disease model, again, saying that alcohol is something that is genetic and it's something that has to do just with the biological makeup of the subject. And William Porter kind of goes against this. He sees it more as a learned behavior. And I agree with that. I'm not terribly convinced that alcoholism should be seen as a disease at this point. It's something that I am going to research more about and learn more about for sure. So I agree with William Porter on that, but I'm not sure I agree with his view on the subconscious, right? Because, in Psychology 101, your freshman year of college, you learn about Sigmund Freud a little bit, and he sees the subconscious as this space in the mind in which all of these emotions and urges and feelings and desires kind of swim around, all unbeknownst to you, to the subject, the person who is, I guess, embodying these things. And for what William Porter is talking about, it just seems very conscious to me, right? You drink, and after that you feel anxious because that's what alcohol does to you. And then, of course, you're going to want to drink more to relieve the anxiety. That seems very conscious to me. So I'm not sure how that relates really to the subconscious. And unless he has an entirely different conception of what the subconscious is, um, which is fine. But yeah, but what I certainly agree with him on is kind of this idea of alcohol as the vicious cycle, right? Like I just said, you drink, it's gonna cause anxiety. What are you gonna do to avoid falling into farther into an emotional pit? You're gonna drink more, and you think that that's going to ease your suffering, which of course it's not. It's gonna make you even worse, but that's why it's called a vicious cycle. All right, wrapping things up here. And again, I thank you for listening to this episode and sticking with me to the end here, because I know this is not particularly pleasant to talk about, and I don't really like talking about it either. And I think an important thing I want to say is that I don't want my podcast to be, or anything that I say, to be kind of, you know, bogged down in negativity. And I don't want to shame anybody from drinking ever, right? Because that's not the idea. And that's counterproductive. And people shouldn't be ashamed for drinking. It's what people do. And certainly I'm somebody who would, like I always say, I would like to enjoy an alcoholic beverage from time to time, because it's kind of nice. And it's a nice little body pleasure, isn't it? But at the same time, I did this episode because I think it's important to recognize fact and truth. And there's just a lot of information out there that relates to alcohol and the harmful effects that we don't talk about and that we don't know. I mean, I had no idea that alcohol was so closely related to cancer. So cancer causing. We don't talk about that. We talk about cigarettes. We talk about the fucking UV rays and whatever. But we don't talk about alcohol as the main contributor to cancer. I mean, imagine how different. Imagine how different our conception of drinking would be if, for example, in baseball games where they have those moments where everybody stands up to cancer, and you have those, like during the seventh inning stretch, and somebody holds up a sign of somebody who had cancer, right? I mean, just imagine if in one of those moments there was like a PSA that came on right after that talked about the detrimental effects of drinking. You know what I mean? It would just be incredibly impactful, because it's something that people don't know about and don't talk about, and something that people don't want to talk about either. People don't want to talk about. It's very easy to point your finger at a smoker and say, "Oh, you're putting yourself in harm's way." Everyone's done that at some point. But you could be doing that holding a beer in your hand, when you're in fact putting yourself in harm's way to cancer as well. So anyways, I wanted to say that. So yeah, thanks for sticking with me. But again, I don't want to shame people. I don't want to shame people for drinking, because I understand why people do it. I understand why people like it. I still would like to enjoy it from time to time, but in the end of the day, it is a poison. And important to remember the fact that pure alcohol would kill you if you downed a whole bottle of it. And you can't, because it will literally burn your insides. We drink it in diluted form. Beer has typically a beer is 5%. Typically wine is 10 to 12%. Your shot of whiskey is like 40%. Yeah. Can't drink it 100% because it's poisonous. So diluted down, it's still pretty bad. It's important to remember that at the end of the day. And last thing I'm going to say, every day we do things that are risky to our health. We get into cars, we fly in airplanes, Going outside every day is a health risk, honestly, which, especially in these, that's been made abundantly clear during this time of quarantine, when it's like going outside actually could kill you. But even when there's not a global pandemic going around, we make these choices every single day of putting our lives at risk, putting our health at risk, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that is a little bit of cognitive dissonance that goes along with alcohol, because I think it's important to understand that when I drink and when we drink, we are putting ourselves in harm's way. No matter how you slice it, no matter to what degree of a drinker you are, when you are drinking alcohol, you're doing something that's harmful to you. And if you're getting drunk and binge drinking, you're doing something that's really harmful to you. And if you're drinking every day, you're doing something that is really, really, really harmful to you. And I think that's the truth. I think that's the reality. And it's a conversation that I want to have with myself before I pick up the next time that I pick up a glass of wine. It's been a long time. Jesus. I've been in quarantine I don't think I've had a drink of alcohol maybe in a month or so. It's been a very long time. I'm doing great. But yeah, the next time I take a sip of alcoholic beer, I want to have that conversation with myself. Yes, I'm about to do something that's detrimental to my health. It might be fun. It might be pleasurable. Great. That's fine. There's no shame in doing it, but in fact, it is harmful. And that's the reality that I don't want to hide away from when I am faced with the decision to drink or not to drink. In The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald said, "First, you take a drink. Then the drink takes a drink. Then the drink takes you." This has been the Stone Cold Moderation Podcast with Chase Lee. Thanks for listening. Make sure to check out the complete show notes of this episode on stonecoldmoderation.com, where you can learn more about us. For access to more content, please subscribe to our YouTube channels, check us out on all other social media platforms, and make sure to tune in next time. We'll be talking about, is alcohol moderation really possible?